Do you feel that there is a call to action here?
We wanted to understand violence towards girls by boys. I hope what we're not saying is your kids next. What there are all over the country is a lot of very confused boys and a lot of boys that are saying or doing harmful things to girls because they have been polluted.
Are you confident that this will bring change?
I care about this world and I care about the people in this world, and I hope this drama provokes a question about it. But, I'm not a specialist in this. I'm just trying to get them to talk about it.
In case you hadn't noticed, there has been a TV drama that has been on Netflix called Adolescence. And I suspect there's not a person in the UK who probably hasn't watched it. I am not a binge watcher of TV. I watched the first 5 minutes of the episode and knew I'd be going to bed extremely late that night because I watched all 4 episodes in one go. It was utterly phenomenal and the most extraordinary piece of drama that I've seen about a subject which people were vaguely aware of, but I think brought to life the whole idea of the manosphere, the incel and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and we started talking about it last week. And we asked why Adolescence had touched such a nerve. And we've got Jack Thorne here, and he's the writer, the creator, along with Stephen Graham. And I want to start there, I guess, Jack. I mean, you normally know when you've done something that's going to set the world on fire.
Do you?
I guess I'm asking you, did you know it would have this effect? It has been number 1 in the UK. It's still number 1 in the US. It's been top watched in, I think, 71 countries on Netflix. Did you know you had that?
No, of course we didn't. And we were aware we'd made something that we were proud of. I was aware that I was working with the most extraordinary group of people and that what they'd done was phenomenal. But no, the idea that we would explode in this way, and it feels like we have exploded slightly, is insane. And I've spent 20 years trying to make drama that talks, and to be part of this is just extraordinary.
I know it's a drama and it is a fiction.
Yes.
But do you feel that there is a call to action here? And if there is a call to action, what is that?
It's interesting you use the phrase call to action because that's a very popular phrase amongst the manosphere. I think that...
That's mateless. If you ever want an example of Andrew Tate come to life, it's mateless.
They're all hidden under the chair.
I hope so. I hope it's the beginning of a discussion. And listen, we don't have any answers here, and we're not saying this is some sort of documentary that takes you inside. What we wanted to do with this drama was pose a question, and we wanted to understand violence towards girls by boys. Specifically, I'm saying not men towards women, boys towards girls. And we wanted to get inside that problem, and we wanted to make it as complex as possible. Stephen had one stipulation right at the beginning of the writing process, which is we're not going to blame the parents. We're not going to do a drama which says someone does this because they've got an alcoholic father who hits them, or they've got a mother that controls them, or any of those sorts of tropes. Mm-hmm. Because his belief, my belief, is that things are a lot more complex than that. Mm-hmm. We're not saying either that Jamie is a product of the manosphere. We're not saying that Jamie is the example of incel culture. What we're saying is that a huge number of factors, parents that didn't see him, a school that couldn't help him, friends that couldn't reach him, his own brain chemistry, and then what he was able to access online led to this act.
Jack, I'm going to back up just a tiny bit for the 4 people who are listening who haven't yet seen Adolescence, because it starts and it is the murder of a teenage girl and the police going in and arresting this kid.
Yes.
And you think this is going to follow the classic route of a crime whodunit. It's not that.
No.
It is about the motivation for that. And Stephen, you're talking about Stephen Graham, who was the brilliant actor,
yes,
who played the father in this role and played it so utterly compellingly. So you didn't know it was going to be as big. Why do you think it's become as big?
I think because everyone making it, and I accept myself from this, is very good. So, that it's a well-made show. It's tapped into something quite primal, which is people's fears of what happens when teenagers' doors are closed.
And that is the key to it, isn't it?
Yes.
It's the idea that they are in this hidden world. It's
Yeah.
not like they're down at the park playing football or with their mates kind of at a chess competition or whatever it happens to be.
Well, you
Yeah.
used to worry about your kid going out at night, and now you worry about your kid staying in at night.
Yeah. And I think it's COVID plays a huge role here too. And we never mentioned COVID in the show, but there is a whole generation of kids who were denied social contact at a really, really crucial age and spent that time in their rooms online. And that was the way that they were able to communicate with people, and that's the way that they were able to build friendships, and that brought them into something which has got lots of beautiful things in it and a few very, very problematic things in it.
So you mentioned right at the beginning, laughing at me, the manosphere.
Yes.
And that
Sorry.
is something that is sort of underlying but not spelled out. You don't mention Andrew Tate by
We do.
name. Oh, you
We do,
Yeah.
but the kids don't. The adults do, because
Yeah.
it's the
The
adults'
policewoman.
shorthand. It's the adults' shorthand for understanding what's going on.
You talk about the 80-20 dynamic, don't
Yes.
you? Which is this idea that unless men are real men, they're not going to get their girls.
Yeah,
right?
80% of women are attracted to 20% of men, which is a very, very compelling statistic. The idea that you are unattractive, you don't fit, and the reason why is because the world is created and for women. And so therefore you have got to compete as hard as you possibly can to either fit into that 20% bracket or learn how to manipulate women so that you can change that equation.
The other thing I thought that was so compelling was the portrayal of this kid. I mean, the acting, where he goes from vulnerable small child who's wet himself, who is kind of innocent in the world, to this sort of monster, and kind of seemingly moving between the two, and the pain of growing up. I thought that was a kind of really compelling, and I suspect that the other reason of the success is the relatability of that for an awful lot of people. Their sons may not have committed murder, of course, but that kind of bit between one moment you're this vulnerable child who is sort of looking lost and needs his parents and needs the love, and the next time is going out with a kitchen knife.
Yeah, and it's horrific. And Owen Cooper, who plays Jamie and plays him remarkably, is like the one of the most extraordinary things I ever saw was him in. We shot episode 3, that two-hander first, and watching him put on Jamie's mask, watching him put on Jamie's clothes, and then watching him become Jamie was one of the greatest experiences I've had as a dramatist. He just is. He is a phenomenon, and I hope what we're not saying is your kid's next. I hope what we're not saying is, there's Jamies all over the country, because of course there aren't. But what there are all over the country is a lot of very confused boys, and a lot of boys that are saying or doing harmful things to girls because they have been polluted by what the internet can do. They've been polluted by messaging, not from Andrew Tate. I don't think Andrew Tate is particularly taken seriously amongst kids, but by people who have taken on his message and
So one of the criticisms I've read of the show is that
Yes.
it was 4 episodes, and you glance at all these issues, but you don't dig into it, the manosphere and the role models out there. Would it have been a better show if it was 6 or 8 episodes and you spent a bit more time doing that?
I think that the great advantage of the one shot is that it encourages you as a writer to be incomplete. It encourages a partial telling of a story. So all you get is sort of 4 blinks of an eye, where you follow the story for a little moment and then you cut away from it. And that encourages the audience to sit forward. It encourages me as a writer to do things that I'm not used to doing and to tell stories in a way that I'm not used to telling them. I don't go inside the legal process for Jamie. I don't even resolve the question of whether D.I. Bascom finds the knife, which is the big plot of episode 2. I just sit in a moment for a while and then pull out of it. And that encourages, I think, an audience to sit forward and ask its own questions and do its own investigation and think about it and talk about it in a way that is new to them. And that's what we wanted beyond anything else. So if we'd spent an episode inside the manosphere, I think we might have been more easily dismissed. Actually, by being that partial look at something, we allow ourselves to tell an interesting story rather than a story which tries to answer every question.
You've started a conversation with our viewers who've got questions for you, and
Brilliant.
we're going to come on to those. But I mean, one of the debates I think that this has started is this whole question, this phrase of toxic masculinity.
Yes.
And it feels like the sort of world is dividing into people who say, we've got to call out toxic masculinity, we've got to show what is going on here, we've got to show how responsible people like Andrew Tate are, and people who say, don't keep on referring to masculinity as toxic, that's really bad for little boys, for young men, don't keep telling them that everything masculine is bad and harmful. And that's having a sort of reaction with women, girls, who are like, for sake, we've just started talking about the women. Do we now have to go back to feeling sorry for the boys, for the men? And so I guess my question, I mean, it is the complication, the complexity that you're talking about. Do you feel that toxic masculinity is a useful phrase, or is it just pushing the genders further apart?
It may do. I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about the show a few days ago on this, that you talked about the Me Too movement and how the Me Too movement may have caused a distance, and that distance may be part of the problem here, and that we've got to find a way to fuse these problems, like, you know, answer the question of gender identity in a new way, because the way that we've been answering it is perhaps problematic, and I don't know the answer.
I mean, there's still women, honestly, who are saying, I cannot believe it. You know, we've been concentrating on men and men's behaviour for like a 0.1 second. You know, the Me Too movement happened, and then it got overtaken by people going, oh, you see what you've done to men now. Oh, you see what you've done to little boys now. And I think there's a lot of kind of frustration amongst women who think that they had the conversation for such a tiny amount of time, and now somehow it's their fault again.
Yes. And I hope this drama is not playing into that notion at all, because of course it isn't. And this drama is about harm that is done to a girl. And how we stop that is one of, I think, the sort of central questions going forward, and not just harm to girls when it's done with knives and ends in deaths, but harm when it's tiny things. And I've got a almost 9-year-old boy. We've got to work out how to navigate masculinity so that it doesn't end up in this tiny space. My masculinity, because I've been on TV a lot in the last week or so, has been called into question because I don't look like the sort of man that they want me to be, because they certain members of the online community, and they've attacked me for whether they say I've got too high estrogen levels, or that
so
my sexuality, exactly, and that's the thing that we've got to get out of. We've got to get out of toxic masculinity. That I agree that easy labels are a problem here, and we shouldn't be applying easy labels to anything, but we also need to be trying to encourage young men to think of masculinity as a spectrum. And that's part of the problem with the manosphere, that it sort of discourages people from saying it's okay to look different to other men. It's okay to not fit into the specific male categories that you would like us to fit into.
So Jack, among the bouquets there have been brickbats as well.
Yes.
And one of the brickbats has come from, again, and I suspect it's a similar sort of people who are wondering about your estrogen levels, who are the people who are saying, why was it the portrayal of a white boy who commits a knife crime when it's mostly black kids who commit knife crimes in this country? And that was a travesty, and it was just, kind of misleading.
And they've claimed that Stephen and I based it on a story or another story, and so they're saying that we race swapped it because we were basing it on here and then it ended up there and everything else, and nothing's further from the truth. That I have told a lot of real life stories in my time. I know the harm that can come when you take elements of a real life story and you put it on screen and the people aren't expecting it. There is no part of this that's based on a true story. Not one single part.
But what is your reaction to the criticism of it? Well, it was kind of, you were.
that it should have been a black boy.
Yeah.
Well, it's absurd to say that this is only committed by black boys. It's absurd. It's not true, and history, shows a lot of cases of kids from all races committing these crimes. We're not making a point about race with this. We are making a point about masculinity. We're trying to get inside a problem. We're not saying this is one thing or another. We're saying this is about boys.
And did you expect the demonisation, or has that come as a surprise to you?
It's come as a bit of a surprise, but truthfully, I'm 46. I'm very comfortable with how I look. I'm not bothered by people saying that I should look a different way. I was bothered when I was a kid, but I'm not bothered anymore. So no, I've been fascinated by it rather than upset by it.
I'm going to bring in some of our listeners' questions. Eddie has asked, was it deliberate to have little focus on the girl that was killed, Katie? Her friend was really upset, but that theme was just left in midair.
It wasn't deliberate, but our focus was on Jamie. Our focus was on trying not to empathise with Jamie, but to understand him. And we set out not to tell a whodunit, but a whydunit. We wanted to understand what had taken him to this place. And that required a lot of screen time to understand that. Katie, I hope, is a full and fully realised character, and you do discover bits and pieces about her along the way. But we didn't want to look in that direction. We didn't want to almost complicate our story by bringing too much of her in. I wish, having now seen it and completed it and thought about it since, I wish we'd spent longer with Jade, her best friend, because I think Jade was a really interesting character and she was beautifully played. And
she was really angry at Katie's death.
She was really angry at Katie's death, and I think there was a way that I could have written that episode 2 where I gave the audience slightly more glimpses of her, and in retrospect I would have written a bit more of her in, but that's always the case with every drama you do. You sort of sit back and watch it afterwards and go, you know what I mean, there was a story there that I didn't quite see. So I wish we'd done a bit more on Jade, but I think doing an episode on Katie or spending time with Katie's family would have sort of taken us into a story that we weren't telling, and that would have been a mistake.
Well, can we just go to another question?
Yes.
This is from Jackie, and she says, the only real detail we get about the victim was that she was foolish enough to send a topless photo to a boy, and that she seems to have been involved in bullying Jamie and his friends. It's reminiscent of her skirt was too short, she was drunk, victim blaming. After that, she and her family are almost erased from the narrative. It's Jamie's fate we wonder about. Jamie's name we'll remember. Was this a conscious reflection of how murdered girls and women, and in turn their killers, are treated in today's media?
I don't think that is the only story we hear about Katie. I think that through Jade we actually get an understanding of what kind of friend she was, and I think we didn't want to fall into the trap of creating a perfect victim. And she isn't a perfect victim, because perfect victims don't exist. And harm is done to all sorts of different people who live all sorts of different lives. And we didn't want to fall into that trap. So it's not her skirt was too short thing. It's that she lived a life. She behaved imperfectly at times. She did not deserve to have this happen to her. And we need to mourn her. And she was clearly loved, as we see from the response of the people at the mourning that we see, and she was also a beautiful and brilliant friend to Jade, and so I don't think we do quite fall into that trap, but I do hear the complaint.
One of our other listeners asked if there is, this sounds crazy, is there a second series in this?
I don't think so, and I don't think Stephen does either. I think that we've told the story that we wanted to tell. We would like to do another story with the one-shot template perhaps, and we are thinking how we might be able to do that, with Phil Barantini, our brilliant director, but no, I don't think it's about what happens next to Jamie, because I think we've told that as fully as we possibly can.
One of the most depressing scenes in the whole thing is what happens inside the school.
Yes.
You see this architecturally beautiful school. It all looks like it's functioning and glass and light and working, and none of the kids pay any attention to any of the teachers, and none of the teachers look like they have any say over what happens. Was that based on a school? Did you visit schools? Do you think that's how British schools work?
I think that's how certain schools work, and that it's a school that isn't particularly functioning well. I was a learning support worker in a school. Hannah Walters, who's our exec producer and Stephen's wife, and who plays Mrs. Bailey in the school, was a teacher, and we spent a lot of time talking about how to portray this school, because the important thing was that this school hadn't reached Jamie. You know what I mean? Like, that if when we're telling this story, we're talking about lots of blame that's shared by lots of different sources.
It's all in the iCloud, isn't it?
And this dysfunctional school isn't working. And unfortunately, these dysfunctional schools do exist. And I've had a lot of response from teachers telling me that, they felt that we had represented something here.
And if Jack Thorne was the PM now, would you be saying a really obvious way, something that could happen tomorrow, is to ban smartphones from schools?
Yes, I think that's a necessity, and I wish they were considering it.
Up to what age?
Up to the age of 16. I don't see why kids should have phones in schools anyway. But that would remove a toxic influence from the thing. The other thing I think we should be thinking about, which is what the Australians are doing, which is a digital age of consent, so that we try and remove our kids from social media. They can still have phones, they can still communicate with each other, they can still have WhatsApp groups, they can still have games, but that idea of trying to prevent them being involved in these spaces, because these spaces create an anxiety, these spaces and these spaces
we're seeing that in
spread
Australia.
ideas.
I think we're seeing it in Austria. There are more and more countries in Europe now that are putting this on the table.
Yes.
You'd call on the government to do that here?
Yes, I really would. And I hope they're having that discussion, because...
Are you having that discussion with the Prime Minister?
I'm not. We want to talk to the Prime Minister if we possibly can. But let's be clear, we're dramatists. We're not saying that we've got all the answers here. I'm saying what I would do as someone that's looked inside these holes, because I care about this world and I care about the people in this world, and I hope this drama provokes a question about it. But I'm not a specialist in this. I'm just trying to get them to talk about it more fully than they are.
I mean, Jack, you say this is a drama and not based on any school or incident or real life or whatever. But for the second time in 18 months, journalists are meant to be the ones who bring things to public attention. For the second time in 18 months, we've got a drama
doing our job better
the job better than we can do, which was the post office scandal, with Toby Jones and all the rest of it, which was absolutely brilliant and did affect the compensation payments that were paid out.
Yes.
And you have now done a drama that everyone is talking about. I mean, are you confident that you will get this will bring change?
I hope so, and I think TV has an enormous power, and drama has an enormous power. I was lucky enough to do the McTaggart lecture the year before Emily did her McTaggart lecture, and I talked about TV as an empathy box, and I really believe that's what it can do. It can take you inside a problem in a different way, because it encourages you to sit in other people's shoes. And journalism is an incredibly powerful tool that's changed the world for generations. But I like that drama's now sitting at that table. It always has, but I like the fact that drama's getting a more prominent place at that table right now, because I do think that drama can change the world, and that's why I like working in the drama space.
So the next thing you do, Jack, just
Yes.
to sort of come to an end, will almost certainly be something that I guess we put in the mould of social realism, that casts a light on a problem that you think should be examined. Is that right?
Actually, I'm not doing so much of that as my next things. I've spent a long time telling these stories, and I do want to keep telling these stories, but no, at the moment I'm sort of swerving off into
sci-fi.
I'm doing an adaptation of Lord of the Flies is the next thing that will probably be on TV, which is
that seat is booked for you. Please come back when it's out.
Well, you're going to do Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because that's gone so well for Disney. Jack, brilliant to have you with us. Thank you very much.
You.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.